Gunline. Fire mission coming down. Damn, I had a brain fart right there. I'm your host, Lopez, and you're listening to the On the Gunline podcast, episode number 300, baby, episode number 300. And today with me, I have two very, I want to say, two people that I know that'll be able to give me a good education in a way regarding their points of view on a certain topic, for example, like the economy. All right. Today's topic, we're going to be discussing the economy, specifically the minimum wage. Because sometimes on the field, we get deep, we might be, in the 13th series, but we don't just pull string, go boom. We want to know where our money's going, damn it. No shit. So with that being said, I got Campos here and Duke. They're going to be here joining me. We're going to have a discussion. Just like we did out in the field, y'all. So Duke, welcome. Campos, welcome. And I'll just go ahead and give it a crack. So check it. The minimum wage, y'all. I was thinking about this shit and because I saw that it was supposed to be going up in certain places coming up this year in 2024. I'm not sure if that was 100% or not, if it was state by state or federal. But I pulled up, all right, what the federal minimum wage is. And y'all, I don't know who they expect to live off of this, but at for example, what state do you live in, Duke?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. All right, Oklahoma. And you live in Nebraska, right? Or in Iowa?
I live in Iowa, but I work in Nebraska.
Okay. I mean, they're right next to each other pretty much, right? But I wish I could make this bigger so y'all could see it. But let's go ahead and start off with something in the eyes. Iowa, your minimum wage is $7.25. All right. And then Okie over here, $7.25. And then Texas, $7.25. All right. I did some quick math while, we were having some audio and technical issues earlier. And it turns out that comes up to $1,160 a month. That's before taxes, y'all. Hopefully you don't have a family just, making minimum wage because y'all ain't going to eat. You know what I'm saying? I think that rent alone will take all of your money. So I think that the federal minimum wage either should be abandoned, but at the same time, that leads me to believe that people would take advantage of those, that come over here and not pay them the proper dues, I guess. I mean, I don't know. So let's start with Duke, if you don't mind, since I see you on top on my list. Duke, where do you stand on the federal minimum wage? What are your thoughts on it?
So, I understand that there is people that have no other choice but then to go and find a job regardless of what it is. Like, they don't have any education, any experience, and maybe they're in their early 20s or their early 30s or whatever it is, and they got to go work. And so that is their only option. But I don't want to talk circles, but so my wife is in management and she works for Love's. I don't know if you guys know what Love's is.
You're talking about the Love's, the truck stations, right?
Yeah. So she works for Love's, and even her lowest employees, they make more than minimum wage. In Oklahoma, they're making $13 an hour to run a cash register and make sandwiches or pizzas or fried chicken or whatever it is. And so she's a manager, so she sees that directly. And generally, most of the people that work for her are young, underage, they're in high school, or they are elderly. And they're already in the state of Oklahoma making more than minimum wage. So then the minimum wage of 7.25. I don't think that is ever intended on like me or you or anyone else to survive off of. I think that is intended on like you are under 18, you are going to high school, you're working part-time,
Okay.
and you're just going to work. I think that adults that don't have any other option are kind of funneled into that same bracket because and I don't know what the answer for that is. I
Right.
don't know what the fix for that problem is because that is a problem where it's I'm a grown man. I have no skills or abilities because I
Right.
made bad decisions or not even made bad decisions, just am not just didn't pursue any specific thing to help me.
Right.
So now how do I provide for my family working at McDonald's? So I think that and this is just my opinion, but how do we fix that problem of we do have a class of people, a group of people that haven't been able to better themselves in a sense. I don't mean to sound cold-hearted, but uh, like they just they didn't want to go to college or they didn't want to pursue a trade. They just wanted to do something. And they're working these some of these people are working 40 plus hours a week,
Hmm.
but they're working 40 plus hours a week at a job that was intended for high school students. Not
Agreed. So, if you don't mind, I'll cut you off a little bit here. I think that what it boils down to, and like you said, it's not trying to sound heartless, but it's the reality that you're gonna get minimum pay for minimum effort, minimum, you know, intellect needed, I guess, per se, for that job. You know what I'm saying? So it's not that you're being harsh about it; it's just the realities.
yeah.
Um, so I get what you're saying.
And to like expand on that, not to cut anyone off,
No, no, no.
my wife, she is in management and I think she's on salary, but like equivalent to like what she makes hourly is like $28 an hour. And she said that when they get people that are older and that want to do more and pursue more into the company, like they take those people and they don't pay them minimum wage. They pay them quite a bit more, almost twice minimum wage to begin with. But they immediately start like um, grooming them for management positions.
Right.
They immediately are like, oh, you're like a normal person that just had like a bad hand in this whole thing. Now let's train you, teach you about management, and then like promote them within the company. And it's
So I
all about like, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say so it's kind of like based on potential. So
Yes.
let me bring Campos into this. Campos, what are your thoughts on the minimum wage? I know you were telling me off air when we talked. You have a different way to look at it. Now I don't know what that is. I can't wait to hear it because Campos. One thing about Campos, like he's a very outside the box thinker, is what I've come to realize. But everything that he does say, it makes a lot of fucking sense. So give it to us, Campos. What is your thoughts on minimum wage?
Okay, so the first off, the thing I want to start off with is that we have to understand the transformation that our economy has went through from where we're at now to where it was over 100 years ago. Where we're at now, we're in an economy. Some people may call it a capitalist economy. Some people may call it a corporate economy. But we're in an economy now where corporations are getting bigger, smaller, small businesses, locally owned businesses are getting smaller, and we're losing them. And with that said, what that means is we're having a society where more people are turning into workers, and their livelihood is based on a wage instead of ownership. And if you go back 50 years ago, like, and some of us who are older, think back to when we were kids, how many local locally owned businesses that we saw in town. We don't see that anymore. I remember when I was a kid, I didn't see a Walmart in every city and every town in the country. I didn't see McDonald's and Burger King wasn't everywhere, but that's basically what we're living in. And if you go back 50 years ago and you talk to your grandparents to what it looked like when they were kids, and if you go back 100 years ago, um,
Hmm.
so that's very, very important to understanding it alone because you go back 100 years ago, you didn't have everybody making a wage. Everybody's not like it is today. Everybody their livelihood is based on an hourly clock of wage. Yet a lot of the family farms were smaller and they were owned by the family farm. That's what your livelihood was based on off of is that you produced, you created. Your livelihood wasn't
Right.
based on a wage. Now it's becoming more corporate. So now all those farms that are producing, they're hiring people. So basically, you're a subject. You're subject to a wage instead of owning and producing. Same thing with businesses. Businesses are getting bigger. So with that said, uh, what I have to go into the second part I have to explain is basically the different types of businesses. You have corporate businesses, and then you have sole proprietorships and partnerships that are not incorporated. They're businesses that are directly owned by a person or individual or individuals, and the full liability is on that person or persons in a partnership. So with a corporation is a privilege that it separates the assets of a business and the people who own it. And so what that does, it's a privilege. So then that privilege with those businesses that are incorporated are able to produce in the marketplace at a competitive advantage. And then normally what comes out of that is monopolization. And then you have businesses that employ 500 to 100 to 500 workers in a factory. And depending on the structure of the business, such as a publicly traded corporation, which is traded on the stock market, its sole existence is profit. And so, in order to get a profit, sometimes that may mean, well, we need to cut wages or we need to let people go. And as a kind of reaction, people unionize. So, with that explanation, and I could go more, but I don't want to go all day. We can talk more.
Bro,
But with
I'll
that,
tell you
but
what
with
right now. Let me just cut you off real quick. I want to say something. Speaking with you guys, I feel like okay, I'm the dumb one, and then I go to Duke. Duke is like the college guy. He went to like State University, and then Campos over here is breaking that shit like Harvard style. Like he's telling you, why this shit is that way. Damn, bro. I mean, you make me feel retarded, but at the same time, it's teaching me, so I appreciate it. You know what I'm saying? So, let me try to bring this down a little bit more. Let me ask you: for those that say that when you raise the minimum wage, you're also raising the price of goods in the economy. Is that true or not true? Campos.
so yes, it is true. Um, but let me answer
I'm
the
sorry, you
question
were
because I
gonna
didn't.
say, bro. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Because
You know what?
I
Go
didn't.
back to your thought. Go ahead.
So I gave the explanation, but I didn't answer the question that you originally asked. If what do I think about the minimum wage? So with my explanation, I
Oh,
go
okay.
basically the minimum wage with the with the current economic system we live in is both bad and good. It's bad because as with your question you just asked, yes, it does in turn causes them to raise prices because they have to make up for it, and it's also bad in the sense that you raise the minimum wage and that affects all businesses. So a company like Amazon, Starbucks, Target, Walmart, they can afford a raise in the minimum wage. They can afford that. But your
Right.
small mom and pop store down the street, that's a small locally owned business that is subject to that law as well, they can't afford the minimum wage to be raised to like 15, $20 an hour. And you're really starting to see
Right.
this in cities like Seattle and Portland, where the cities have raised their wages so high, it's causing small businesses to go under. And of course, Starbucks, even though they may complain about it a little bit, they'll also behind the scenes they're all for it because they know it stomps out their competition and they know that they can afford it. And even though in the short term it's a higher expense on them because they have to pay higher wages, in the long term it's going to benefit them because now their competition's gone and now everybody has to work for Starbucks and Walmart and Target, and so it's
Let me,
bad.
but
That-
let me ask something real quick, if y'all don't mind, to both.
yeah.
Um, Well, let's be real. I mean, these jobs for a barista, that's not meant to be a
Yeah,
permanent fucking job. Same thing like what Duke was saying. McDonald's was not meant to be a career.
yeah.
You know what I mean? That was like for those
Well,
high school kids to get a summer job, get some work experience
yeah.
under their belt, or while they're still living with their parents and whatnot. But I don't think. I mean, I think that they're going to end up
Well,
boycotting themselves to pretty much an extinction. Because I've seen now where you can just go up to a panel on the side of the fucking
yeah,
window and you order what you want right there, bro, and then they just bring it up to you. So that's one
yeah,
less job right there, one less cashier. What do y'all think about
yeah.
that?
Well, I mean, for people in general, I mean, it allows places like McDonald's to not hire, people. But the thing is also with what you said in your, I guess, in your question in regards of like barista or working at McDonald's wasn't supposed to be meant to be, forever. But the problem is that because of monopolization, with like Walmart and Target, which is everywhere, McDonald's, Burger King, that's everywhere. I mean, that's all we're getting to a point that that's all that's left. And so then if you want to work anything outside of that, you have to basically get a degree. You basically have to get bare minimum an associate's degree or a college degree if you want to move up. Otherwise, you're going to be forced to work at places like McDonald's because they're the only places that are going to be able to accept you without having one because that's all there is.
Hmm. What do you think, Duke?
So, like, I don't know what you guys do for work or anything, but
Retired.
um, retired. Um, well, so since I've been out of the military, right? I I got out of the military and I immediately got a job as a pipe fitter, making $23 an hour. Um, and I didn't know anything about pipe fitting. I just knew people in the right places. Um, but so I started pipe fitting, but I did have like a background in construction out the rip. Like I built houses before I joined the army.
Mhm.
Like I could frame houses and make $1,000 a week, uh, effectively and efficiently and profitably before I ever joined the army. Before I even turned 20 years old.
Damn.
Um, so as a fucking teenager, I was was able to make quite a bit of money
Mhm.
because of my choices. So regardless of that, then I joined the army. I get out. I'm a pipe fitter. I do that for a little while. No idea what I'm doing as a pipe fitter, but I learn how to do it. And then I get my CDL. And then I go and I drive trucks. And I drive trucks for a little while. And I fucking um, feel like I'm extremely overworked as a truck driver. Like, I don't know how hard you guys have ever worked in your entire careers, but I will say, as a truck driver working for a huge corporation, um, I was working for the biggest um, flatbed company in the United States as a truck driver, and I was working so much that when I started that job, I lost weight. You know what I mean? Like
Fuck.
yeah. So as a truck driver, I lost weight, and I made really good money, but I was way overworked. I worked so much. So then um, I quit for other reasons that we can get into later. And I started doing security. Security is a shitty job. I don't recommend it for anyone getting out of the military. Don't do security. And I did it for a very short amount of time. And then I went to go work for my uncle, who is a truck driver and he owns multiple trucks. And I made like a decent amount of money as a truck driver working for my uncle. But then I bought my own truck and I became
Mm.
an owner operator and I
Okay.
worked for myself. So I know what it's like to own a business. And I did that until my father died. And then when my father died, I quit and I came to where I'm at now. so I came to where I'm at now, and now I'm working for my father's old boss, making well over the minimum wage,
Mm-hmm.
just doing construction, and I'm completely happy with where I'm at. Even though, like, when I was driving a truck, I would make $1,000 a day, like literally $1,000 a day. But I had so many expenses to go along with that, and so like we talk about the minimum wage, but we talk about what it's like to be a truck driver.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't even touch a load unless it paid me $1,000 a day. So like I wouldn't touch a load if I couldn't pick it up, drive it, and deliver it the same day and still make $1,000. Like
Well, just to add to this real quick, just a quick question. But with truck drivers, though, truck driving itself, they don't get affected by the minimum wage because they get paid by based on the mileage, right?
yeah, so they get
And the
paid.
load.
Yeah, and so that's like the whole like thing that I'm trying to push is like so I've not just the world. I've been all over the world. I've been all over the United States. I've been from the East Coast to the West Coast. I've been in New York. I've been to the top bottom of California. I've been all the way up north. I've been all the way down south. I've been on the border of Canada, and I've drove along the southern border of Texas. Like I've literally been everywhere in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and while I was doing that, like I would see signs at Taco Bell hiring people at $16 an hour. So Taco Bell is hiring high school students at 17 years old for $16 an hour all across the United States. McDonald's, my brother worked at McDonald's last year. I don't know what my brother is doing now, but last year my brother was working at McDonald's as just a normal guy making $18 an hour in Oklahoma. So
See,
even
and
though
that was my next thing. Mm-hmm. Go
so
ahead.
even though the minimum wage is 7.25 in Oklahoma, that's not what these corporations are paying. They're paying significantly more. I still don't think that you like I think that if you are a young high school student, maybe even potentially like early college and you don't have any experience and you're looking for your first job, you shouldn't expect more than minimum wage. Like
Right.
because that's not your forever career. I have a sister that's in law school that makes fucking way more money than I am, and she's in college as a law student,
Yeah.
and she fucking makes a shitload of money working at internships, and she's making money at internships. She graduates next year, or she graduates 2024, so she graduates this year.
Nice. So hopefully,
So
well, that's gonna be a lot of debt that she's gonna be into. Let me bring Campos into this. Campos, when maybe you might know this, but when was the minimum wage thought up of, and how was it supposed to benefit us, as Americans?
So, so it was implemented in 1938. It's actually there was a law that was passed in 1933 by FDR, but it got ruled unconstitutional. And so the next law that was passed under the Fair Standards Act, I think it's called, 1938, and so that's what basically put into the federal minimum wage that we have today. So, and I go back to again with that history. We have to understand that the Industrial Revolution or industrialization in the United States really took off after the Civil War. Um, After the Civil War, that's when all these laws started getting passed that liberalized corporate entities, and then it gave rise to people like J.P. Morgan, John D. Rockefeller, Carnegie's, all those people um, during that time period. Some people call them captains of industry, some people call them robber barons, but
Hmm.
it was because of those liberalizations of corporate laws and entities is allowed for that. So once we start having a society where businesses are now employing 500 people into a factory, and they're based on your livelihood is based on a wage, unions start to, as a counter reaction to that, unions evolve as a counter
Okay.
reaction. And so during that, so then throughout that time period and all the way up to FDR, and FDR is considered probably the most progressive president that we've ever had. Um, as a counter reaction through that industrialization, that's why they implemented the uh, minimum wage, the federal minimum wage act. It's basically a counter reaction to the industrialization, or I like to say corporatization of the country. And like I said, it's a good and bad thing. I've mentioned the bad things that and cause. The good thing about it is that if you don't have, when you have corporations that exist and people's livelihood are based on wages,
Right.
corporations are going. I mean, if you don't have that safety net in place, they're going to pay people at very low wages. Um, I mean, that's just the reality. I mean, you see it right now. I mean, one of the reasons why corporations are so welcome to getting people here illegally, illegal aliens, is because
Right.
they're hiring those people so cheap and they're paying them under the table. They're able to pay those people cheap because they know they're not going to defend themselves because they're here illegally. Well, what are they going to do? And then two, they can also pay them under the table without paying federal income tax, Social Security, all this other stuff. So that's a prime example currently right now of where corporations, if their hands are not tied, they will pay you really really low if they have the ability to.
So, I mean, what are y'all thoughts on if there was a standard that should it be based on the state? Kind of like the way I see it here. I mean, 725 is not going to be enough anywhere. I don't think, honestly, a fair living. And I get Duke's point as well. As far as like, hey, you know what, you made your choice. You're gonna make what you make because of the choices that you made. You're responsible for, your own outcomes, right? So, but with that, I mean, 725. Fuck, I just don't even know where the fuck that could
So
be possible to live
so
in, bro. Not even
so
in bumfuck Kentucky, out in the Ozarks. I think it's livable. Go ahead.
so 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 just like, are you familiar with the concept of supply and demand? It's the
Yes,
basic
I've
concept in
heard of it.
economics.
Let me
Okay.
let, let me rephrase it. I've heard of it, and I know it's like every time I hear somebody talk about
Okay.
the economy, it's supply and demand.
So the
Yes.
higher supply you have of something, of a product or anything,
Hmm.
the higher supply of it, the price of it will go down, and then the higher demand will cause the price of it to go up as well. And
Hmm.
so sometimes it fluctuates. Okay, depending on what's higher, the demand, the supply that's higher,
Right.
and so you have to apply the same thing to wages. When there's a higher supply of workers, and again, if our society is based on wages and working, having a job instead of ownership,
Hmm.
then depending on the supply in that particular economy is going to determine what the wages are going to be. For example, McDonald's and Burger King and fast food is mentioned. I used to work out in an oil field. This is back in 2018 in Odessa, and at that time, like where I'm at now, in most places, fast food probably paying like $9 an hour starting.
Hmm.
In Odessa, it was paying, we're talking 16, $17 an hour starting because
At McDonald's
the
and fast
demand was
food.
so hot in Odessa, Texas, because the oil field was booming. There was such a demand for it, and the
Right.
supply of workers were so low because nobody didn't want to work for McDonald's because everybody wanted to work for the oil field, which they're making $22,000 a week. Why would you work for McDonald's when the oil field is higher in Odessa? And so it all depends on the supply and demand, and so that's why McDonald's and Burger King had to pay their workers starting 16, $17 an hour when everybody else around the country is probably like $9 an hour because of the supply and demand.
So, I mean, check this out. Over here, they have In and Out, right? They just opened up In and Out
Yeah,
a couple of years ago here in Texas. And they're starting their works like around $18 an hour to flip burgers and shit like
yeah,
that, bro.
yeah,
And this is in Texas. Now, the one thing about Texas
yeah.
is the cost of living here is fucking cheap. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
when they start doing shit like that, does it cause the economy to start going up, or not like economy, but the cost of living? Does that get affected as well? Then, like when people, like if somebody's making $18 an hour, how does that affect like somebody who's in a more professional business? You know what I mean? That Okay, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
When I first got out the army, I was working as a what's that shit called? Fuck, man. Claims.
Telemarketer.
No, I was working at not telemarketing, but it
Oh,
was a inbound call center to file claims.
okay.
$15 an hour. Okay, $15 an hour. It was a big change in pay from
Yeah.
making what we were in the military to out here. Regardless, though, when I found out that motherfuckers at HEB pushing carts were making the same amount as
Yeah.
me, I was kind of pissed the fuck
Yeah.
off, And then
Yeah.
put on top of that, I'm bilingual, so I started getting paid bilingual pay. So and then,
Yeah.
sure enough, they made the at the place I was working at, they made it a starting of $21 an hour. You know what I'm saying? So now, no
Yeah.
matter who comes in at this office or at this business, they're gonna start off at $21 an hour to answer a fucking phone. All right, and file a claim.
Yeah.
$21 an hour. Me being a translator who's supposed to, or to have these specific skill sets. How is that fair to me? I'm only making $4 extra more now. You know what I mean? For a skill set that's supposed to be, pretty high demand. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of fucks everything up, doesn't it? And then it makes the cost of around the
So
area where you live at go up too, doesn't it? Or am I just like,
that depends. That all depends on the.
oh, go ahead, Duke.
Oh, so I'll listen for a second, but
Oh, okay.
Cost of living,
Yeah.
minimum wage does affect it, but like one thing my wife and I were just discussing is like, so she works in Eufaula, which is a lake town, and I'm from Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
where there's lots of ski towns,
Mm-hmm.
and like the price of, so just take Colorado as an example. Minimum wage in Colorado is, I don't know, you have the statistic, you tell me.
$14.42 right now in Colorado.
$14.42. So I just got off before I came on and had all the technical issues.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I was on the phone with my uncle and my nephew, my 18-year-old nephew that's in
Mm-hmm.
Colorado, got a job working construction as a laborer. He has no experience at all.
Mm-hmm.
Entry level. And when I was his age and I started doing construction, I made $10 an hour. That was when I got out of high school was 2012. So in 2012, I was making $10 an hour. And in 2011, when I don't know what the minimum wage was then, but in 2011, when I would go and work summers at the same job, I would make $5 an hour. So from the time that I graduated to the time that I was in high school, I got I went from $5 to $10 an hour. So, anyways, with that, in Colorado, my nephew that has no idea what he's doing about working construction, I taught him how to read a tape measure like 3 months ago to
Oh
read a
shit.
tape measure, and he's making $18 an hour working construction in Colorado.
Fuck.
$18 an hour as a dude that is not expected to know anything. When I was in Colorado, as like, oh, okay, you know how to do some things. We don't know you. We'll start you out at $25 an hour. That's what they were going to start me out at in Colorado before I came here to live with my wife.
Right.
Was $25 an hour, just because I know how to read a tape, I know how to run a saw. Like I'm not saying that I'm the best carpenter in the world, but I'm probably at least average, if not slightly above. And they were like, we'll pay you 25 an hour. My
So,
nephew, so
mhm.
like the minimum wage thing, I get it, like why it's an issue, but then at the same time, I don't get it because it's like everyone's like, oh, minimum wage, and like these corporations don't want to pay it. But like I know for a fact, my wife in Oklahoma right now is hiring people for over $13 an hour when minimum wage is $7.25, and
Right.
they're hiring them to do the minimum. Like they're not required. and she is she's in management. She's
Right. So like we
hiring
said,
people
minimum
and
wage
doing,
is usually for the entry level, right?
yeah.
And
So it's like, go
like
ahead.
you touched on something. You touched on something that I know that I wanted Campos to start speaking on, and I think his eyes kind of lit up when you mentioned it, like people arguing about the minimum wage. And earlier we were talking about, was it the paradigm left and the right or something like that you were calling it,
Yeah,
Campos?
false left right paradigm. False left right paradigm.
All right, so basically, if you could just go ahead
False
and
left
break
right
down what that
paradigm.
is.
So basically, the false left right paradigm is basically creating two sides against each other. Okay, in our country, we have a two-party system, which this is the best example of it. We have Democrat, Republican. One will get elected in office. At the same time, they're taking the freedoms and justices away from everybody. The other people get in office and they do the same thing, and then they just basically go back and forth, back and forth. And then sometimes when it comes to an issue such as minimum wage, they both make good, legitimate arguments. At the same time, when you implement one side, it's going to benefit people, but at the same time, it's also going to affect people in a negative way. Vice versa with the other side. That's why when it comes to the false left right paradigm, this issue is a good example of that. Because with minimum wage, when you raise it, like I said, you have people who are working very low wages for some of these big corporations or whatnot. And so you raise the minimum wage, people like that are going to benefit from it. It's going to help them. They're going to benefit from it. But at the same time, when you raise it, especially when you raise it really high, small locally owned businesses can't afford that, like McDonald's, Burger King, and Target and all that, because they got the money, they got the millions of dollars in the bank. Mom and pop down the street, they don't have that. So you see how it benefits people, but at the same time, it doesn't. So then you look on the other side. Let's say if we don't have the minimum wage, what's going to happen is you are going to have corporations who are going to take advantage of that. You're going to have corporations hiring people very low. And again, this all depends on the supply and demand. If corporations know that they can go to another town or another country and bus hundreds of people over here and pay them $4 an hour, they'll do it because at the end of the day, it's going to benefit their bottom line. And then guess what? All the local people, it hurts them because now they can't get a job because the corporations say, well, you can come work for us. Who's going to work for $4 an hour, $5 an hour? But you know, someone in another state or town or another country who they can bus in, they'll be willing to do it, especially if they're from another country where the dollar their currency is worth less. Because even if they're getting paid, $4 an hour, that currency in their country is probably worth way more, and they can buy more stuff with it. And
Let
so
me ask you,
at
since you
the end of the day, it
let
comes
me
down to
ask
supply
y'all.
and demand.
Gotcha. So let me ask y'all something. Duke, how versed are you with crypto?
Uh, so I'm not versed with crypto. I don't like crypto.
Okay,
And I have a reason for it, and I don't want to go into that unless you want to, but um,
do it.
like
Um,
just go whatever I'll say
well, no.
whatever you
What I was
want
gonna say,
right
what I
now.
was gonna, so what I was gonna say was because like a lot of companies, I think are gonna start turning towards crypto. Like there's gonna be a lot of or not just crypto, but it seems like that's the way that the government wants everything to start going to, is like a
All,
cashless society.
I think that's that, and I don't know. Maybe Campos will know more than I do. I think that is almost in the works of being a requirement. Like the United States wants to move towards that completely, and from what I know is or from what I've seen is there's a time limit on it. Like they are trying to move to that completely 100%.
Thoughts, Campos? What do you think,
so
Campos?
cryptocurrency is horrible. It's probably is bad. So what the Federal Reserve and the government's trying to do is they want us to go into a cashless society because it puts more control into their hands. Um, because at the end of the day, all they have to do is create. They no longer have to create money just with paper, which is bad itself. All they got to do is just type in a few numbers on the computer and inflate the money supply. So that's the goal. Hopefully, we don't ever go to that. But the problem is that with that argument, there's people who they think that the alternative to fight that would be private cryptocurrency, which that in itself is horrible. We've already seen um, money laundering with it. We've already seen
Right.
2 or 3 people. What do you call it? A Ponzi scheme. Have already done
Mhm.
Ponzi schemes with it. We've already seen people lose money, but not that. I always keep things to the basic.
Mhm.
I will never ever support any form of currency that is man-made, whether that be the government creating Federal Reserve notes or the Federal Reserve creating Federal Reserve notes or private cryptocurrency. It's all man-made. I will never accept anything because if you allow your economy to be based on that, you're allowing individual people to control the money supply through inflating it, either not creating it or creating more of it,
All right.
and that
I,
can
I'm
lead to devastating things to the economy as well as individual people.
so my question is like, okay, I'm not well versed at all on the Federal Reserve. I know it's a bank
Yeah,
that
yeah,
the government borrows money from, but
yes,
it's our own fucking money,
yeah,
and then it charges itself interest, right?
yeah,
Why the
yes.
fuck do we just have a Federal Reserve? I don't understand it.
So So since you're asking that question, I'll go real quick. So this goes back to the original debate between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson at the beginning of the
Okay.
country. Alexander Hamilton wanted it because he wanted a corporate style society because you can't have a corporate society without a central bank.
Okay.
Thomas Jefferson didn't want it because he understood that it's a system that benefits the few at the expense of many. He wanted a society, as stated in the Constitution, we the people. And with the central banking system, you don't have that. You basically have, from their perspective, you have basically a elitist society like there was back in old Europe,
Right.
and that's why we broke away from Europe, is to get away from that. Well, Alexander Hamilton wanted that. So it wasn't implemented. It was dissolved. We got rid of it. Then there was a second central bank, and then Andrew Jackson fought against it. He got rid of that. Um, and then you go fast forward to 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve Act and the Federal Reserve System. And the Federal Reserve didn't have the power that it has today from when it was created in 1913. The power that it has today was an incremental progress that's happened since then. So, like when it was created to be the lender of last resort for banks. But now it's turned into,
Mm.
because of the fact that FDR has taken us off the gold standard, and then the government was still on the gold standard up until 1971 with Richard Nixon, and then Nixon took us off
Hmm.
that. And so when he did that, that gave full 100% power to the Federal Reserve in regards to the creation of the money supply. And
Gotcha.
so basically, what the Federal Reserve is, it's a private bank. We don't know who the owners is because it's never been fully audited ever, and it only got a partial of an audit in 2011. Thanks to Ron Paul, and we
That's my
found out
boy.
horrible things from just that. But then, so we don't know exactly who all the owners are. We just know that they're the banks, and it's a privately owned bank. And with the government forcing everybody to use Federal Reserve notes, we have to use their currency. And so every dollar that they print is basically a loan to the federal government, which can never be repaid. Um, and so, but the problem is, and the only thing the Federal Reserve does is it prints money, and the only reason why it has the ability to control interest rates is because
Hmm.
we are forced to use Federal Reserve notes. If the government didn't force us all to use Federal Reserve notes, they would have no power whatsoever when it comes to interest rates.
So,
It's only because of the fact that we're forced to use it is allows them to
so,
have that control on interest rates.
okay. Let me ask you. Becoming a cashless
Yeah,
society. I'm sure all three of us are
yeah,
not in favor of that, right? Or I mean, we want to have something tangible versus just having
yeah,
all control on a card. But it seems that everything that we have as Americans, everything we pay for is on a fucking debit
yeah,
card. How
yeah.
how hard would it be for the government to just say, "Hey, you know what? You haven't been paying your taxes. We're going to go ahead and just freeze your account and you can't make no payments."
There you go.
You
Yeah,
know?
there you go.
Oh, we don't agree with the way you bid. Go ahead, Duke. What you got, baby?
Uh, so sorry, I'm adjusting my phone.
No,
Um,
that's cool, baby.
and I kind of have a question, and like I want to say a couple things.
Yeah.
So, um, uh, so no, when you have a bank account, it's a law. I looked it up. Um, no other organization can like uh, fuck with your bank account basically, and bleep that out. So like if you have a car loan, your the bank that you have a car loan through can't freeze your account. That's my wife.
Hello, Mrs. Duke.
She said hi. Um, they can't freeze your account. They can't draw from your account unless it's a credit union. So a credit union can directly take from your, if it's like you have a Navy Federal Credit Union account
Hmm.
and then you have a Navy Federal Credit loan for a car or a home, and you miss a payment and they know you have money in that account, they can directly pull it. So, but like a normal bank can't do that. That's a law. That is a
Damn.
that is a law. So, for the rest of the United States, I don't know how that works. My question though is, um, so like if we rewind back in time, we go back to like the Silk. What was it? The Silk Trail or the
Silk Road.
uh, Silk Road, the Silk Road, right? They were traveling on boat and they were doing all of their trades in coin, right?
Hmm.
So you would have this merchant that would provide a product, and um, he would sell silk and spices and rum, and he would collect a bunch of coins. And then eventually it got to the point where he couldn't carry all of his coins because he made so much money. So China said, hey, give us your coins and we'll give you paper money. And so he gave them all of his coins, and it was like, oh, okay, we have your money. This is the money that we give you that's paper is guaranteed, so on and so forth. And that's where we came up with paper money. And then now it's building up to the point where it's like, oh, we no longer need paper money. We need digital money, which I don't agree with. I don't like digital money, but we all function off of digital money already. Our money that we're putting in a bank account is like real money to an extent, I guess, but it's like it's
It's just being
there.
typed in versus being something tangible.
Yeah, exactly. And so where is all of this money at? And what happens when we transition from paper money to digital money? What happens then? Like,
Mm.
so is it the same concept of like when those people were paranoid and they were like, I'm not going to trade in all my fucking coin money for paper money. And I'm not going to trade in all my paper money because I have an uncle. I have an uncle that rents houses, and my mom was like, Uncle Eddie has $10,000 in cash under his bed, and I was like, $10,000 in cash is really going to do him a whole lot during the apocalypse. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, why wouldn't we use our money to buy gold or
Fair
silver
question.
or like? So that's kind of what I'm getting at is so regardless of whatever, I don't have the right answer, and
Mhm.
I don't know who has the right answer. I'm just asking the question of like, when do we draw this line of like, no, these valuables are mine and I'm going to do what I want with them, to yeah, let's move forward, let's just have faith in the government and go on. So,
Oh,
and I don't know. I'm asking you guys almost, I guess. So
uh,
maybe that's not common for the guest to ask the questions, but I am
oh
asking.
no, dude. I mean, this is an open forum here. This is all three of us just giving our conversation out. We learn from each other. I think this sounds like a Campos question. So, do you have an
That's
answer
kind
for
of
that
what
as
I
well?
thought too. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so the founders of this country understood the importance of money and sound money. Okay, they understood, of course, through when the American Revolution happened, they were printing continental dollars, where there's a term that was coin called not worth a continental, because they were just printing so much of it, and then it got to a point where merchants around in the colonies, when we were fighting the British, were like, I don't want that, give me something else. And
Right.
so it's not worth a continental. So they learned from their mistakes. So when the revolution was over and they created the country, they put it in the Constitution. You can look it in there that should only be gold and silver that should be used as money. And the problem is we're not following the Constitution. But even back then, even afterwards, after the creation of the Constitution, I believe it was the 1791 Act, Coinage Act, that they knew how serious it was. They knew how serious it was that with that act, they made it punishable by death for anybody who messed with the currency or try to counterfeit. And what I mean by that is, well, how do you do that with gold and silver? Is you have a coin, let's say a full silver coin, and you take a like a knife or something sharp, and then you just shave pieces off of it. So people were doing that and then not really giving an ounce, like an ounce of silver. They would give, because they took off shavings, and then they'd save those shavings and then melt it, and then they'd use it later on. But they're lying to people basically by saying, oh, here's an ounce, when it really wasn't an ounce. And so that's basically counterfeit. And the founders understood that, and that's how important it was, is that it made it punishable by death. So basically, the answer really, what it comes down to, is we just need to follow the Constitution. We're supposed to be using gold and silver. That's supposed to be our standard. You can still also have copper and other precious metals into it, but our standard is supposed to be gold and silver. And if it's based on that, then what will happen is you'll have a stable economy and you'll have relative price stability, because the government won't have the ability to create. You can't create gold and silver out of thin air. But whenever government wants something, they just create it out of thin air, and that's why we have inflation. And the average person who doesn't understand that, when the government prints $1 trillion, you're going to see the effects of it a year or 2 years from now, because then you're going to be paying higher prices at the grocery store because the government inflated. Well, if you have gold and silver and that's your only form of currency, the only way government can fund itself is through taxation. And people know when they're being taxed right then and there. And so that in itself is a check and balance for the people and government. Because when government wants something, they're going to have to raise taxes. You raise taxes, people are going to be aware. They're going to protest. They're going to vote you out of office. And if it gets really bad, there's going to be a revolt. So, like I said, that in itself is a check and balance, but it's also honest. It's honest money. You can put 10 ounces of silver away as for savings, and then guess what? 10 years from now, you're still going to be able to buy the same amount of products than you did at that time, maybe even more as the technology gets better. But with paper money, you have $1,000 in the bank. 10 years from now, you're not going to be able to buy the same amount of products that you can, because the money supply has been devalued through them inflating the money supply. And that's what it comes down to, is them having the ability to create that money supply out of thin air. You cannot create gold and silver out of thin air.
So, can I say something? My uncle, he got out of prison around like 2011, and he was just working construction, and he went from being mid-level to eventually to the point of the story where I'm explaining it. When I was working with him, he was making probably close to $100,000 a year. He had been saving silver from the point that he got out of prison to the end of the story, if that makes sense. And he had all of this silver that he had bought and he had put away, and he had all this silver, and he had just bought a new truck, and he was probably like a year or two into the loan. And he just went, and this literally was 2021. He took all of that silver, deposited it, got paid for it, and then paid off his truck, and still had money left over. So he paid off like a $50,000 truck with silver that he had been buying since he got out of prison in 2010.
Yeah.
Now, see, the question about that is, where do you buy the silver? Where do you buy the gold? I see a lot of commercials on it, but are they legit? You know what I mean? Because unless I have it on hand.
So he's buying silver.
For me, anytime I bought it,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Anytime I've always bought, I always go to an actual coin store, and what they sell there, what you want to buy is what's called bullion, because you have like collector's coins that the
Yeah, I'm
price
gonna
of it's
step away,
inflated
but you
because
guys
it's
keep going. I'm gonna step away just 1 second.
Too easy, brother.
Yeah.
because of its collectible value. That's why the value of it's inflated, because
Hmm.
it's a coin from like 200 years ago or something. What you want to buy is actual bullion. That's like the creation of it's quite recent, and it'll say on there 1 ounce 99.9% silver, and you
Right.
can buy it in bars. You can buy it in bars this big. I've seen, of course, it's heavy as hell. But what I always recommend is go to a coin store and say, do you have any bullion, silver or
Okay.
gold?
Now, so weren't coins made of silver at one time? You know, like our cash, our
Yeah,
coins.
yeah,
They were actually
yeah.
made of silver, right? So they actually had some
Yep.
kind of um monetary, what's the word I'm looking for? Value.
Value.
Yeah. As opposed to, like, cash, which is, unless that shit is plated by gold, like, printed
Yeah.
as a gold sheet, it has absolutely no value whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's just a trip,
And
Compost, and
so
I'm really happy that
that's
you're here, dude. Go ahead.
so like I said, it's been an incremental phase since the Federal
Mhm.
Reserve, because even when the Federal Reserve was created, we still was on a gold and silver standard. We still had it, and you still had the ability where I have a $5. It's somewhere. I have a $5 Federal Reserve note, or no, not Federal Reserve Treasury note, not a Federal
Okay.
Reserve note, a $5 Treasury note that has Abraham Lincoln. It'll say U.S. Treasury, it doesn't say Federal Reserve on it,
Oh
and in the
wow.
small print it'll say this $5 is redeemable in legal tender or actual silver, and
See, I
that's what we
thought
had
all
back
of
then.
that.
But
I
over
thought that. So I thought that was something that we
but
could
over
do.
time, not I mean not anymore, because over time we used to have treasury notes. Governments got rid of that, went strictly to Federal Reserve notes. Then even with Federal Reserve notes, at one time you could turn in gold and silver, or turn in Federal Reserve notes and get your gold and silver. But then FDR took us off the gold standard in '33, so then the people stopped using it. But then even then, we still had dimes and nickels that had some silver in it,
Right.
and then more and then the nail in the coffin was really when Vietnam happened, because with Vietnam, war is very expensive,
Right.
and basically Nixon took power, and he basically he was put in a position where, okay, we have all these debts, we owe this much money, we've been paying this much for Vietnam, and as well as all the other crap that the government does that we owe, and
Hmm.
so we either pay that back, which is almost impossible, and we're going to bankrupt, or we just take the government off the gold, completely off the gold standard, and we just print the money and pay the stuff off. And so it was in '71 when Nixon. That was it. That was the final. Like I said, it's been an incremental phase, but that was the final. That was the final nail in the coffin. Is because now it's not backed by anything. It's just pure paper.
It's paper that has absolutely all it has
Yeah,
to talk for is what our military might that says you're gonna accept this shit. Go ahead,
forces.
Duke.
Yeah, if
Uh,
they me or him.
Duke. He
Go
really
ahead.
wanted to say
Go
something.
ahead, Duke.
so sorry, I just jumped back in, and I kind of was hearing some things when I left, and I was hearing some things when I came back. And this is another question, because I've been um, always told, not necessarily from school, but just life, some things, and I want to, I guess, get an idea if they are accurate or not. Because I've never been to college. I don't know, um, but I'm trying to figure this out. So, um, the IRS, right? Where did the IRS come from? What I have always been under the assumption of is that the IRS came from war, and I think it was the Civil War or earlier. Uh, Lincoln, I want to say it was Lincoln, established the Civil War, and he established the IRS after the Civil War, and he said, "Hey, look, we're going to do this thing where the IRS and taxes are the deal, until we pay off the debt that we have acquired during the Civil War. I could be wrong about that, but then it turned into we paid the debt, and then the IRS was dismissed. Like, we didn't use the IRS for however many years, and then we went into another war, and we needed to pay off that debt, and so the IRS became a thing again. And then I think after World War II, I don't know, don't quote me, maybe Compost knows, but then that's when the IRS became a more permanent thing, was after the second round of the IRS being established. So, but then, so we talk about the gold standard, and the gold standard was diminished or removed, and it was like, okay, we're not going to have a gold standard anymore, but it was backed by a plan. And this is a question, like, previously what I was stating was a question. Is that accurate? Now, this is what I'm asking is accurate. So we had the gold standard, and then the gold standard was, oh, okay, we're not going to have a gold standard anymore because the United States money is going to be backed by oil. Oil that we are protecting from the Middle East or like Saudi Arabia. I don't know. Don't quote me on all that. But it was like, we're going to no more gold standard because we're going to be fighting for oil, and oil is going to back the dollar. So from what I understand is all oil that is traded in the world, that is not traded, but or that is bought from the Middle East, is bought in the US dollar. If you're going to buy oil from the Middle East, it is bought in the US dollar. Is that not true? Because
Compost.
So for the
you.
okay, so for the most part, so that's part of the big agreement that we have with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the largest exporter of oil in the world, and that's what it's based on is U.S. dollars. And then also with the fact you mentioned earlier about our military might around the world, we force countries to use our U.S. dollar, and that's basically the U.S. dollar is considered like the unofficial international standard of currency around the world. But it's only based on the fact that we force through military might, basically through coercion or force everybody else to do that. So basically, I mean, for the most part, everything is true. I mean, what you're saying is true. The thing about oil is that oil is an actual commodity. Paper money is not. Oil is an actual commodity, so that's why that's also kind of like the standard is oil, because it's the largest commodity that's basically traded throughout the world. And so you basically have currency, which is used as a standard to buy it, and then oil, which is actually an actual commodity. Gold and silver itself is a commodity, but paper money is not. So yeah, a lot of what you said, I mean, it's true. But a lot of it it all depends on our military and our force and our political influence that we have around the world, because there's a lot of countries that don't want it. Countries, and usually countries that want to get away from the trading in U.S. dollars are usually countries that we're usually enemies with, such as Iran and Iraq, or Saddam Hussein's Iraq, and others. Gaddafi, Omar in Egypt, and so yeah.
so
I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I mean, feel free. Like I said, open platform. Y'all go ahead and talk. I'm listening.
yeah. So that did answer my question. Is like the things that I have thought are correct. So I feel like we're like traveling in the timeline down to almost modern day of what's going on now. So I guess like my next question, and like I feel like I shouldn't be asking the questions because it's your podcast, but my next question is like, so like what happens now, right? Like we're at this, I almost feel like breaking point where we are potentially in conflict with all of these countries. We have issues with China. We have issues with Hamas, or is it Hamas, the Houthis? You know what I mean? Like, we have all of these problems. Um, what do we do? Like, what is the answer? Do we just sit tight? Do like, the American dollar isn't worth shit? They're trying to ship oil all the way around, you know, out of the Red Sea, which is potentially going to increase the price of oil. What does that do to the American dollar at this point? If the American dollar is backed by oil, why are if the Houthis are attacking, like, ships, and America is attacking the Houthis, and there's this whole war going on there. I don't know if I'm saying that right, the
Yeah.
Houthis, but if there's that whole issue going on there, and now they're saying that they're going to route oil, not they're going to route it away from the Red Sea. So how is that going to affect the dollar? How is that going to affect the minimum wage? How is that going to affect me being out of the military? How is that going to affect you guys? How is that going to affect 2024 for everyone else? You know what I mean? Like, Iran doesn't like us. North Korea is actively declaring war on the United States. China is saying that they're inevitably going to take Taiwan. Like, these are all, like, crazy issues, and it's like it all comes down to money and oil. You know what I mean? Like, if the United States was going to defend this, like, why are we even there? Like, why are we fighting for this if the United States has the largest oil reserves in the world, in our continental United States? Why don't we just stop fucking with this problem and pull out and deal with our own issues and just forget about them? You know what I mean? Because I have lots of family that are in the oil industry, or were in the oil industry, and it's like, we don't even drill oil. And if we do drill oil, it's very minimum compared to the amount of oil that we're buying or taking from the Middle East, when we could just separate ourselves from this problem completely. So, and this is a question. So,
Mhm.
where do we go from here?
Go ahead, Campos. I'll double tap off of
Um,
whatever you got, baby.
so okay, so eventually, what's going to happen is whenever you have a paper currency where the value of it is actually zero, it will return to it. And eventually, the system's going to collapse. It's either going to this is what's going. It's either going to have an outright collapse through hyperinflation, or it's going to have an ending where they switch us. They create a new currency, such as like the Amero. I don't know if you ever heard of that, or like what they've done in Europe, where you have the euro, where they basically gotten rid of all the individual states, countries' currency, and gone to another one, which creates another standard. And so eventually, the system's going to end. The question is a matter of when. Um, or the other option is it could end is if we actually wisen up and get the right people in office, and we go back to the Constitution, and we go back to the sound currency, and we go back to the gold and silver. But as of right now, I don't see that happening. But eventually, it's going to end. When it comes to like us trading, I mean that goes back to special interests. I mean, you have special interests of people who aren't, like the Bush family is a good example of this. They have a lot of investments in Saudi oil, and so Halliburton, which is Halliburton's now their headquarters down in Dubai, and so you have a lot of special interests that is they want that trade, even though if we were to produce oil here, it would benefit the majority of the people here. It would benefit, oil work. It would create jobs and be a lot better for the economy. But with people having special interests and then being involved in government, that's why we don't do that. And so, one thing you've noticed is that whenever the prices of oil starts going up, the oil field economy here in the United States actually starts booming. And the reason why that is because right now, when oil is low, when Saudi Arabia and those Middle Eastern countries are selling to us pretty low, we don't drill and produce here because we can't compete with that. Once they start raising the prices, then you'll start to notice that they start hiring again here in the United States, because now, because of it being higher over there, the oil companies here can actually produce and make a profit. Whereas like right now they can't. If they were to start producing, it'd be very hard because we got all these contracts and we're exclusively trading with Saudi Arabia and these other countries. And so it's
So
just not profitable right now when oil prices are low.
I and
And then you
like I said,
also throw in and also throw in environmental regulations that prevent us from drilling and fracking here as well. And that also contributes to it.
so from what I understand is the United States, when we are drilling oil, we are drilling it more efficiently, more cleanly, more economically. Like everything about us doing oil in the United States is cleaner and better for the environment and more cost effective than it is in the rest of the
Yeah.
world. Like in Kuwait, they just burned billions of tires just a couple months ago, and they want to attack the United States for um, they want to attack the United States for being like so harsh to the environment and so bad. But like statistically, the United States is leading the world in progressiveness, and like we have reduced emissions more than any other country in the world right now. And like in the amount of we've reduced it. I'm not saying in the amount of that we are producing, but the amount of that we've reduced our emission footprint more than any other country in the entire world. So I like I don't mean to sound like an asshole, but I do feel like I kind of disagree with this. Like we can't compete with our prices because when we were fracking in the United States and we were producing our own oil, we were producing better oil and it was cheaper.
Yeah.
Like right now, as of right now, like what is the price of gas? I didn't
So
fill up today, but I bought gas today and it was $2.50 in Oklahoma, which is
Mm-hmm.
low compared to a lot of places. It was $2.50. When I was driving trucks and I was buying oil under the Biden administration, it was significantly higher than under the Trump
yeah,
administration. So the price of gas was lower during the Trump administration. And during the Trump
yeah.
administration, I had friends that that had jobs and they were making good money producing oil. So I don't agree with that. The, when the Middle East decides they want to produce oil, that the price of fuel or the price of fossil fuels is cheaper because we have literally seen like
It's,
contradicting evidence of that in real life.
All right.
So
so there's always multiple contributing factors to an issue, not just one. So in regards of what they're producing more or not, Saudi Arabia, that's one contributing factor. Another contributing factor would be whoever's who's ever in the White House. Depending on, like, for example, when you get Trump in the White House, he's going to, with his executive order that he has ability, he's going to uplift a lot of these executive orders that has to do with the environment and these regulations that prevent companies from drilling and or paying more money or fines or any of this other stuff. So when you have a mixture of all these contributing factors, that contributes to whether the oil companies start having jobs, um, producing here. If it was up to me, most of all these environmental standards would be lifted, because I think we should be producing it here. Because one, if we were producing it here, it's allowing us as a country to be more
Mm-hmm.
independent and not dependent on Saudi Arabian oil. Two, it's providing jobs here,
Mm-hmm.
very well paying jobs. Um, and it, and then overall for producing it here, eventually it is going to allow the price of gas to be very low. The reason why it's not so low, it'd be lower than what it is now. It's not so low now because we don't have the ability to produce it. Once we have the ability to produce it, supply is going to go up, and so then the price is going to go down.
But
So
being that y'all said that now, just want to drop my little 2 cents in here real quick. Dude, it's these fucking tree huggers that stop the shit from actually happening here in the United States because we got to lead by example and we got to be cleaner and we got to do this and do that. We're gonna be the only ones doing it. That's it. Nobody else is gonna fucking follow suit.
Yeah,
so
So
China's not doing that.
go
well,
ahead, dude.
so my only question is like, why don't we have the ability to produce it? Why can't we produce our own oil right now?
Environment,
Like,
environmental laws, environmental
Mm-hmm.
laws,
so
and also whoever is in position of power. You got someone like Biden, who's going to favor environmentalists and the people that are supporting him in his party. He's going to do all he can with executive order to prevent oil companies from drilling.
yeah, so I know, I get that, but like no offense, Compost, but I almost feel like we've been arguing the same point this entire time. Um, but like, if that makes sense, like kudos to you because we've been like arguing the same point, and I've been like, man, I feel like we're saying the same bullshit. But
Y'all are. But in different ways that people can understand. Like you bring up and he explains the why. You see what I'm saying? So honestly, it's just like a learning experience for me, y'all. Because you're asking questions that I wanted to ask, but I didn't know how to ask. You see what I'm saying?
yeah,
And so I mean, dude, this let me ask you, and I think a lot of it has to do like Campos was saying with the environmentalists, the fucking the tree huggers that but there's lobbyists in people's ears, there's these motherfuckers saying that, hey, we're gonna go do more solar. We want to do more electrical shit.
Yeah,
And they got their fucking
and if
they're greasing up the right fucking
and
gears in the
yeah,
government
and
to
if
keep restrictions. Go ahead.
people like that lobby, and I'm not saying the oil companies don't do this or they
Hmm.
haven't done this in the past, but people like them, the solar and wind energy, when they lobby, they want these regulations on the oil on their competition. Because if you put regulations on their competition, it forces people to use them. They make money. It forces monopolization. And so instead of having a free competitive market, and I'm all for all different types of energies to use, but if it's free and competitive, it benefits everybody. But when you lobby government and put laws in place to prevent somebody from entering the marketplace or vice versa, now you're going to favor somebody and they're going to make tons of money off of it. I mean, Al Gore is almost a billionaire now because he's invested
Jesus.
so much money in the wind energy and solar energy and alternative energies because all the lobbying he's done, it benefits him.
It's a trip, man. Thinking about like, dude, it's funny how this conversation started off with like, minimum wage and shit like that, and where we're at with it. I love it, dude. This is the type of conversations I like to have, because they're very very educational. You know what I'm saying? And it
Yep.
piques my interest, so
Yeah.
hopefully it's piquing the interest of other people as well.
Yep.
How do you think this next election is going to affect the economy? With our two-party system, which is garbage.
Yeah.
Any of y'all?
Going it. So I mean, again, this goes again. It depends on we've already seen what's funny. What's interesting about this election is that we have two people who are either a current president or a previous president, and so we have the ability to see what one person who's already been president what they've done and how it's affecting the economy, and then we are currently seeing right now one person who's president and how it's currently affecting the economy. So, if Biden gets reelected, all that's going to happen is the same stuff that's happening. And if anything, if more Democrats get elected into the Congress, then it's going to embolden him even more to push more regulations that they want. For one, because he has more of his people in Congress, and two, he doesn't have to worry about getting reelected again.
Hmm.
I think if Trump were to get reelected, then we're going to return back to what we had when he wasn't president. He'll uplift these executive orders on the oil industry. We'll start having a boom here. Hopefully prices of the oil will go down and it'll create jobs, as well as other things that he's done. And I don't agree with everything,
Hmm.
but I think with Trump being in office, they'll have a much more positive effect. And then of course there's RFK, who I think for the most part will probably have a much more similar effect that Trump will have. But I do think there are some certain things that RFK is pushing for, such as housing, and for the average person to have the ability to get home, which will affect the average person more than what it's affecting right now. Like for example, right now you got the average middle class home that's being built right now. People are paying $2,000 for a monthly mortgage. That is ridiculous. For an average everyday home or middle class home, it should be somewhere around under 1,500. But the reason why you don't is because right now we have a monopolization on the basically real estate industry through finance, and so
I'll,
that's basically why it's just so damn hard for people to get a home right now.
I'll say this: when Trump was in office, my 401k looked really nice. You know what I'm saying? And it seemed. I think the
Yeah,
only thing that threw. Now, look, I'm not a MAGA motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? But I did
yeah,
enjoy Trump in office, mainly because he made things a lot of fun, like really fun and exciting, and he had motherfuckers on their toes. And my 401k looked really well. The thing that fucked him was the whole COVID shit. That completely destroyed it.
yeah,
But I kind of find it funny, like,
yeah,
and I don't know if this is just me, but Biden taking credit for all these jobs that he's creating. Well, aren't those the same jobs that were just fucking canceled out because of COVID? So he didn't create anything. It's just motherfuckers are going back to work.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
At least that's just my point of view. What you think, Duke?
Yep.
So I dated a girl, like hopefully the wife's upstairs. She doesn't give a shit. But I dated a girl that was a nurse,
Hmm.
right? And she said basically that um, during COVID there was a lot of layoffs. So my uncle, I've talked a lot about my uncle, but I have
Hmm.
a lot of uncles. And I have a large family. So I have my uncle David, and he was in the army. He was a captain in the army during the same time frame in which I got out. He was a
Hmm.
captain, and he got out. He finished his degree, and then got into the workforce. And he's basically into uh, like management of a hospital. So um, I had talked to him about like, oh, these are specific things that like I'm potentially thinking about pursuing. And one of the things that I was like thinking about pursuing when I got out of the military was the paramedic stuff.
Hmm.
And he said, well, the hospitals are hiring paramedics as nurses because paramedics like have almost the same training as nurses with significantly less amount of schooling. They understand the same things, but um, they're still hiring them for way more than I'm making now. But it's like you could get hired as a paramedic. Like I make good money now without going to college. Like I have
Hmm.
my full GI Bill untapped, but I could go to school for 2 years, become a paramedic, I still have 2 years of GI Bill, and get hired in a nursing position in a hospital and do everything that a nurse is doing. I don't know because I know that there's different levels of nurses, and I don't totally
Right.
understand that. But it's like an entry level paramedic can potentially be hired as what some hospitals are hiring nurses as, and it's like they're they're paying them $50 an hour to deal with patients.
Hmm.
Um, where if you were just a nurse and not like a traveling nurse, you would make significantly less than that. Or if you were a traveling nurse, you would make significantly more than that. Um, but it's all because of COVID.
Right.
Like that all like before that, you wouldn't see a paramedic
Supply and
working
demand.
as a, yeah, so supply and demand. You wouldn't see a paramedic working in a hospital as a nurse just because. It was because we needed them at the
Right.
time. And now that door has been opened. And I don't even know if they're still doing that. I'm just saying that
That's crazy, though. I mean, can you imagine going to school to become? I mean, I'm wondering what it was equivalent to. Being a paramedic. Because I mean, I would think that a registered nurse would probably not to shit on paramedics, but probably would feel insulted. To be compared to a paramedic. Because like registered nurses spend a hell of a lot of time in school. You know, so I mean, and I'd like to maybe look into that as well, because I want to see, was it like an LP? Because I'm sure there's a shitload of different nurses. Now, I'm not gonna say a paramedic's gonna be the nurse that wipes asses, because they do go through a lot of schooling and a lot of fucking specialty training. I'm guessing, you know what I'm saying. But to be comparable to RN, that's a little iffy there, huh?
so like there's so many levels to it. Like I don't know at what level. Like I don't know if it's a registered nurse level
Mm-hmm.
because you so on the paramedic side, because I've looked into it because I've been considering doing this as
Right.
a career. So you have your EMT certification and then you have your paramedic certification. You can become an EMT within 12 months. And that's like a long time frame. And
Mm-hmm.
then you can become a paramedic within 2 years. So within 2 years of your GI Bill, you can become a paramedic. Um, Nursing school, I have a cousin that is a nurse, and I have a cousin that is like a hospital like management, and I have an uncle that's like a hospital management, and those schoolings are like 8 years. To be
Right.
a manager of a hospital is like more like 8, but then a nurse, from what I understand, is like 4 years, 2 to 4 years, where a paramedic or an EMT is like 1 to 2 years. So it's like I have a dude that went to school for 2 years that can make as much as a nurse that went to school for 2 years. So even if it's like 2 years, the equivalence level is similar, but then your qualifications at the end maybe aren't. Like maybe the EMT is like more qualified because they can go off and get jobs that pay just as well as people that got went to school longer. I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's like Campos says, supply and demand, and I think that's what I'm gonna end up calling this episode here, supply and demand, episode number 300. Gentlemen, it has been about an hour and a half now, and the old lady is home, and she is starting to, you know, uh, let's just say, wife being a wife. So before we close out, Campos, closing comments from your side.
Well, I guess I'll end it as this. Remember that everything has to do with supply and demand, no matter how you look at it. And wages are the same thing. And companies will look at it and apply that same. They apply it the same logic and reason to supply and demand, and that's the reason why, or to wages, and that's the reason why we have the problems that we have. Um, so we have to look at it as that. And I think the only problem to the solution is that, and it's what I've talked about in the past, is that we need a constitutional amendment that defines corporate personhood, where the law cannot be forced to look at a artificial person, which is a corporation or artificial entity, and a natural person, which is a human being, the same. Right now, the Supreme Court says we have to look at it the same. And so we need a constitutional amendment to overrule that, so then we can put laws in place where they're not applied equally to everybody. For example, I think any business that's incorporated should have a minimum wage. But if you're a business like a mom and pop, a sole proprietorship or partnership that's not incorporated, then that law should not apply to you. But as of right now, the the Supreme Court says that all laws have to be equal because all persons are equal. Well, an artificial person is not equal to a natural person. Um, and so
bro.
that's I think that's the solution to the problem. And if that were to happen, I think we'd have a lot more people working together on both sides of the aisle and just people in general.
Right on. I appreciate that, Campos. Duke, any closing comments on your end?
Mine are not as deep as his because I just don't know what to say. But what I will like to say is like congratulations on episode 300.
Oh,
And
appreciate that.
no, that's awesome. That's a huge accomplishment. Um, and you know, I hope many more to come, and you can ask me on any time. And hopefully, I'll see Compost on in the future with when I'm on. I'm sure he's been on many more episodes than I have, but we could all get together again in the
Maybe
future.
2 more episodes. It took us forever and a day. Campos, we were trying to get him on here for a hot minute. But no, honestly, I appreciate that, man. Episode 300, I've been doing this almost 4 years now. This year is 4 years that I started doing this damn thing. And it's a slow and steady pace. You know what I'm saying, motherfuckers? There's others that blow up quickly, but just as quick as they blow up, they fizzle out. I'd rather just take my time, get the base of the people who actually want to listen to it. Is every fucking podcast going to be a banger? Nah, it's not, But I mean, every podcast is going to be somewhat informative. So, but with that being said, Campos, thank you very much. Duke, thank you very much. I knew that this combination here would be good. You know what? It's funny because what came to fucking mind right now while Campos was talking was, dude, when AI is finally out there, is there going to be a constitution made for them? Are they going to have specific rights for them, being that they're artificial intelligence, being that they learn on the go? When do we humanize them, per se? You know what I'm saying? That right there started fucking with me when he said that shit. And I think that's right around the corner, y'all. I think that's our next motherfucking form of evolution. And like last time when we were talking, Duke, I think all those camps and shit like that they're making, like FEMA camps and whatnot, they're gonna end up putting us in there. By I mean AI. They're gonna end up taking over and fucking putting us to work there, and we gonna be their motherfucking slaves, yo.
Have
Especially with those
you?
smart cities.
That's what I was gonna say. Have you like talked to Compost? Like you're here. Have you guys discussed that? You know what I mean? Like the World Economic Forum website, and like so BlackRock and Vanguard, they're all
Yeah.
like leaders in fuck, what's his name? Um, I can't think of it. He's Bill Gates. They're all on the board of
Yeah.
World Economic Forum. Like
Klaus
those,
Schwab.
yeah. So he knows. So Compost knows those statistics that I was talking to you about are implemented, or like ideas of all of these people. Like Bill Gates is on the board of directors of the World Economic Forum, the website I was telling you about.
Yeah.
And like um BlackRock, like if you don't know about it, like do some research on it. All those dudes
Yeah.
are like the most wealthy people in the world,
Black,
and they're the ones, like the richest people in the world. They're the ones that want to limit you on how, like, the number of vehicles and clothes that you have. Like it's insane, like the statistics that they've put out.
Black BlackRock's the number one company that has the monopoly on the financing of real estate right now.
Yeah, so they're buying up homes and shit.
Yeah.
Like they don't want
Yeah.
you
And
to
then
own your own home. They want you to like
they don't.
they want you to buy from them, and they want you to live in the
They,
city, and they want you to, you know, fucking shop 25 minutes, or not even 25, like 10 to 15 minutes from your home. Work 10 to 15 minutes from your home. Like,
What do you know
and
about this, Campos? I mean, like what he's talking about. Have you heard about these things?
so yeah, it's okay. So there's one. We go all day off this, but I'll try to make it quick. So there's one you ought to look up called Agenda 21. United
Yeah.
Nations Agenda 21. That's probably the best place you can start. But then with what he's talking about, economic forum, their plans with it, and then with them using BlackRock right now. BlackRock right now is the largest monopoly on real estate right now. When you look at the country right now, like for example, the town I live in Council Bluffs, you go in the middle of Council Bluffs and all these homes, you see homes that were built 50, 45 years ago that right now would probably be worth like $100,000. And they're not that big, they're not that small. Those are perfect homes for like a starting couple or somebody
Mm-hmm.
just starting at like 21 years old, starting with a good job. The average person can't even, they're not building homes like that anymore. They're building these brand new homes that are bigger that you basically have to be making a certain amount of money. You got to be making at least about $80,000 a year, if not 100,000, just to afford a middle class home, because
Right.
those are the only types of homes that they're building. And when they're not building anymore, it lessens the supply of it. And so even the homes that are smaller, which are very small supply, when those homes do become on the market, they go up because you have like 50 people at one time wanting to buy that home. And when that home was probably originally like maybe 75,000, or in a normal balanced
Mm-hmm.
market situation, probably worth like 75, 100,000. They're selling it for 250, 300,000.
And then they could
Because the
fuck
monopoly,
around
again,
with the
supply and demand,
interest
the
on that as well,
monopolization.
then too, right?
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And that's what BlackRock's doing. And so with that said, the agenda of that is that you only have a certain amount of people who are making a certain amount of money being able to live and own a home, and then everybody else they want living in an apartment complex who can't
Fuck
afford it.
that.
And basically, again, this goes back to what I've talked about before about, the way we look at wages. We shouldn't be looking at a society, a truly free society shouldn't be based on wage, because you're a subject. When your livelihood is based on a wage, you're a subject. It should be based on ownership. And so just like everybody should be able to own their own home, that's
Mm-hmm.
ownership. You're independent. Okay. Same thing with having a job. It shouldn't be about jobs. It should be about you owning, either starting something, either apprenticeship or something, or from your family. And then when your mom, dad die or whatever, you take it over, or you start your own business.
Right.
Or if you like live out in the country, you live out in a farm, small family farm. When the parents go, then you take it over. There's freedom, there's independence with that, there's responsibility. We don't have that anymore. They don't these the people, the powers that be, they don't want people who can think. They want workers, they want people dumbed down,
Right.
because people who think for themselves are people who don't want to work for other people, and people want to get paid. They want to be independent and freedom. And so that's what, at the end of the day, that's what the agenda is. And so that's what they're doing with the housing. They want everybody living in an apartment complex, paying rent. They don't want people owning their own homes, except for people who make a certain amount of money.
Right. Well, we're gonna have to pause it here, gentlemen. I think that this is definitely a
Yeah.
good place to pick up on the next conversation with you two. I would be, of course, glad to have you both on here, and maybe you could expound a little bit more on that. What you call it, Agenda 21? Is that what you called it?
United Nations Agenda 21.
Maybe we could
United
expound a
Nations
little.
Agenda 21.
I
All
think
right.
there's a book about it. Uh, and it's a
Multiple books.
If
well,
there's a
there's
book,
a
Campos got it. I'll tell you that.
yeah.
There's mul-
So
there's mul- there's multiple there's multiple books on that. There's multiple, but you can Google it and just look it up.
well, there's the fictional book where it's a story of what would happen if these laws were in place or were to continue.
So so
Um, I don't
so
know what it's called.
so like one big thing that they're doing in cities right now, you may notice this, is that in a lot of these big cities, especially Austin, they're building my friend calls them pack and stack. They're building these big, huge like apartment complexes, and then they're putting businesses at the bottom. That's all part of Agenda 21, because they want everybody compartmentalized and packed into the cities. Because when you have
Mm,
people like that, it's easier to control them.
right. Kind of like they have
That's
them out
But that's
in
failing.
Asia.
That's failing. Yeah, but it's really big in Austin. But they're doing it everywhere. But the thing is that's failing. It's so
It's
funny because they've
failing.
been doing it for the last like 10 years, and many places it's failing because some of these people can't afford the
Right.
the prices, and some of these businesses that are under. And then not only that, it limits the parking. It limits so bad. So it's not like a regular store where you can just drive up. There's a parking lot. You have to
Hmm.
park 2-3 blocks away. Who the hell's going to want to park 2-3 blocks away? Have to walk two three
Right.
blocks to buy something. It's completely nonsense. It's failing.
All right, gentlemen. I appreciate y'all for being here today with me on the gun line, gentlemen. It was
Yeah.
definitely a lot better than I got to stay quiet most of the time, which is fucking awesome because I'm sure people are tired of fucking hearing my voice. So, Duke Campos, I'm gonna get with y'all. See when we can do this again, and you guys are have the conversations that I want to have. You know what I mean? That just blow my fucking mind. They fucking do. And I really want to thank you, Duke, again. I want to for last minute, like literally last minute. I reached out to Duke, like, "Hey man, what are you doing tonight?" And he said, "Hey, I'm gonna be home early, maybe. You know what you need." And he decided to come on down. And I needed somebody else with a little more intellect than me to challenge Campos because I know that I can't. I'm retarded. Again, pull string, go boom. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, dude. Duke, thank you for being here. Campos, thank you for being here. We will redo this
Yep.
again. Uh,
Anytime.
by the way, this year for all my new people that are listening, we're gonna be coming up with a new segment this year. It's gonna be called Word on the Street, and but that's more to follow on that. If you haven't watched yet, I got this other little on the Gunline presents Vet Bro Reacts. I dropped one of those today. So, but this is tomorrow. So yeah, yesterday. Let that fuck with your brain, however it does. Anywho, other than that, man, I don't have much else except for I appreciate you guys hanging out with us, having a conversation that we would out in the field. I hope y'all got something out of it. If you have any questions, feel free to hit us up here on the gunline at gmail.com. Put them inside the comments on the YouTube, or if you have me on the social medias, which is Instagram and the Tickety Talk, feel free to DM me there. But yeah, man. Roland, I know you're gonna be the first one to fucking hit me up over here saying that's my boy Duke. I could already see that happening. So shout out to Roland for putting me in touch with Duke. And shout out to Campos for always being there to living. Let's talk about this, talk about that. This motherfucker be blowing me up with some motherfucking YouTubes. So I appreciate it, y'all. Anything before we go, gentlemen?
Nah, I'm good.
That's about it.
I'm
Just
good.
Google if you want to know more. Just Google Agenda 21.
Oh, I'm going to because that's going to be the next conversation we're all going to have is going to be on Agenda 21. And that way I'm a little more versed in it so I could participate some more. But honestly, it was really good. Duke, don't ever feel like you need to apologize for asking questions. Bro, this podcast is all of ours, all right? Just because I'm not talking doesn't mean that y'all can't talk. You know what I'm saying? That's the best thing about this open forum. Because you're asking questions that maybe I can't think of, but somebody else is probably thinking about it in the car. And they're like, oh, that motherfucker got me. You know what I'm saying? So that's good shit. And Campos, I love the way you break shit down Barney style for a motherfucker like me. So you are good to go. Good thing I'm not smoking weed right now because I'd be fucking woo-wee. I'd be on one. But with that being said, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. You all have yourself a good night. Have a good week. Happy New Year to you all, by the way. Happy
Happy
Christmas,
New Year.
belated. And 2024 has started out solid with with the Cat Williams motherfucking interview, with the Bass Pro Shop guy jumping up in there, with the Epstein list that we're still waiting to see who else is up on that bitch. So
Yeah.
overall,
Now the
gentlemen,
tapes. Now they're talking about tapes.
bring them out. Bring them out. Bring them out. All right, gentlemen. With that being said, it's been 1 hour 43 minutes, and I think I filled up enough time to get it down to 1 hour and 45 total. Rounds complete, and the mission gun line out. March order, y'all. Deuces.